Hello, everyone. Welcome to the Psychic Kitchen podcast. Today we have Chris Fabish from trulyholistic.net. How you doing today, Chris?
Oh, great, Thomas. Thank you for bringing me in as a guest today on Psychic Kitchen podcast. I look forward to talking about all sorts of things and collaborating with you in this podcast.
Yeah, I'm very interested to hear what Chris has to say. He worked with me about 2 years ago, give or take. We had 3 sessions, very groundbreaking, and do definitely recommend him. So definitely check out trulyholistic.net. Um, so explain to us what you do. So we have, because you're very expansive here, man. You're very expansive.
Oh, thank you, Thomas. Well, I kind of term myself as an intuitive quantum healer, and why I really emphasize the intuitive aspect because I'm a big fan on empowering my clients. So obviously, people come to me. Everyone has one goal, right? And that's they won't change, whether that's something physically they're going through that they need resolved, or whether it's manifestation problems or relationship problems. I always say to everybody, everything is energy at its core, right? So, when we're working at that level, we can work on so many things. So, but, I want to do the clearing work for them, but I also want to empower them with information and insights because I know that each one of us have got a creative process, right, in regards to our journey, our path, our future. And I want people to know more about that, right, so they can support themselves. So, I offer a array of things. I do what I call ascendance healing, which is kind of working on all things and everything. I always say anything and everything's energy, which is based on clearing work. And we obviously give the insights with that, but also do reality coaching, which is a little bit different to what they call life coaching. It's a bit more, as you say, a bit more expansive, right, in your own terms there, where again, it's about talking about reality a little bit more and also that person's role within reality, right? So they become empowered and enlightened. And then I also do spinal alignment and posture correction, which is done all distantly through energy. And this is quite in a way quite unique because a lot of people in our field and the people I've connected with within our field, they kind of look at, we can do energy clearing on helping people with depression, right, and get people back and heart centered and back into their consciousness and work all these health problems. But when it comes to something that's so deemed physical as the spine, I need to go and get it cracked by a chiro or an osteopath. But that was one area that I started with. And my journey as a healer was actually finding out where there was a subluxation or misalignment in someone's spine and working on that and working on their skeletal system. So I offer that aspect of it and also make energy tools, mainly tensor technology tools. Like, for example, there's a tensor ring there.
Yeah, they're cool.
And
Right,
make little pendants and all these sorts of things. So again, another aspect of empowerment because we're giving that to the client, which is going to assist their process, their creative process as well.
I'm curious about the tensor technology because I'm a big fan of copper and
oh, cool.
And I haven't really worked with it. I haven't done much. I've got a copper pipe here that I just picked up because I saw it. But yeah, I saw the sun ring and the some of the other the tools that you have and that you make. So yeah, curious in the dowsing rods and everything like that. So I'm curious to sort of find out more about them. But do you want to, Thomas? Do you want to talk more about the session that you had with Chris?
Yeah, I'm remembering bits and pieces because we had about 3. But I remember it was almost like you were working with a universal computer. Because I was watching what you were doing, like energetically, and I was like, he's like working with some kind of universal computer, which I've come across before in my own workings with things. Yeah. But there was one point where you said, I have to bring in a 4th, like you seem surprised. You're like, I have to bring in a 4th generation aspect of him. And I was like, what does that mean? But you were going so fast, I was like, I don't think I should ask him what this means.
Yeah. No, well, let's get into it a little bit more. Yeah, that's exciting. So, as you mentioned the word computer, the way I'm kind of, because I allow my soul to kind of guide the session, right, the process. So, and you'll be very aware that the process can happen very quickly. The dowsing can happen very quickly because I am a dowser. I use a pendulum dowsing chart. Even though I don't use a pendulum, I just run my hand over the chart, but I'm using those types of charts. And my soul always refers to the body as an interface. All right. And of course, in our human life, an interface is quite often referenced as a computer or an iPhone or anything like that. So it's interesting you mentioned that aspect of us as a computer, because we can look at things that happen in general life that can be very much connected to us, the body, or seeing it as a computer, right? Like, for example, dare I say it, the word virus, right? We see viruses biologically, but we also see viruses in regards to computer programming, just as an example. But so when I'm talking about generation 4, we're talking about the word generation. Again, my soul brings that word forth, and it means reality. And we kind of shift that term from reality or universe. Okay. And so this gets into what I call our soul. Our soul is kind of our unique fingerprint. It's our unique energy signature. And for us guys in this field, we want our clients to kind of find their gifts, their unique abilities. So when they bring through more of that, that's what they tap into. And so when I look at our soul as our energy signature, it's an energy signature that kind of is spliced into a multiple realities and multiple universes. So when I say generation 4, I'm talking about your own energy signature, but it's bound to a version or variant of you that exists in another reality.
Okay.
But it's connected to you because it shares that same energy signature. And it's actually connected to a term in quantum physics called quantum entanglement, right? And quantum entanglement, I don't probably have to explain it too much. I'll explain it for the viewers. Is this aspect of, in quantum physics, they see that two particles, and that one particle might be miles and miles away from the other particle. But when they influence one particle, they notice that the other particle reacts and gets influenced exactly the same way. It doesn't matter the distance, right? So when we're talking about quantum, we're talking about removing time. There's no time there. There's no distance, those barriers that we kind of perceive as the human. So I'm going to show you a little map now that kind of shows you what I'm kind of explaining here. And I'll just present that now. And I'll just see if I can get it in there we go.
Oh, yeah.
Right. So I call it the ascension map. And obviously you can see it's depicted as a tree. Right. So that comes into, like the cosmic tree or tree of life, when we know the symbology of the tree. Also in Norse mythology or history, either way you want to look at it, there's the Yggdrasil tree, right? So all of a sudden you can see that the word generation in each one of these bubbles, and that means a reality or a universe where your energy signature as a soul is spliced into. Because what the soul wants is you're here as the soul to have experience to learn from. And we convert that experience into wisdom, right? So therefore, that kind of inner collective that you have as well is gaining all this knowledge. And another thing about getting into the heart, connecting into our authenticity as a soul, you can kind of see it as you're tapping into a very universal or cosmic library. In some ways, I guess you could kind of connect that to how people see the Akashic records in a certain way. So what we were doing for you in that session, we were tapping into generation 4, right? And that there was perhaps a disconnect, or you needed more of that wisdom or knowing from there that was going to help you where you are here.
Okay.
So we see, obviously, and what another important aspect of us being in here is that's the part of the tree that's the foliage of the tree. And perhaps even where there's a flower. And I look at the symbology of a flower or the foliage as the expression. That's where we express ourselves. That's where we have our life. So we express ourselves. This is our ability for us, the soul, to have a lifetime to express or be a representation of who we authentically are. So, and then that obviously supports the rest of us, which obviously is made up of, the trunk of the tree and then the roots and then even the soil, which I like to see all of us having this cosmic tree amongst a forest, right? And then that's where we can see this aspect of all of us as a collective. One thing I want to show you here, you were talking about tensor technology before. So here's a beautiful geometry, right, in regards to that. And that's like the seed of life. So why I want to bring this up is you'll see on here that there's a vortex, which is the spiral geometry. Vortex is the geometry of flow. Okay, and flow is so important, right? Being in the flow is being very present in the now and leading our soul, allowing our soul to kind of guide us. But that's a 2D depiction of it. But if you were to put it on that angle and look down it, it would look like that. And what it would do, it's a bit like a spiral galaxy. It'd be like that, but it's rotating. So it'd be essentially that rotating, or like that rotating. Yeah. So you can that map or that depiction is helped me a lot about understanding and explaining things to people. And also how we go about the clearing process, but also, Jimmy was mentioning there, about the tensor products. A lot of the tensor products and the energetics, which we call a qubit measure, is all depicted or come from that map. So I can connect that person up with a particular energetic or a tool that then connects to an aspect of themselves that I can bring them back to this.
How do you know which generation? How do you know which generation to bring through? Is it just something that you do intuitively, like when we channel and do healing?
Correct. And my way of channeling or intuition is through dowsing. Yeah. So when I'm on my charts, in any session that we do, the reality coaching session where it's not about clearing so much. Quite often we'll just talk like we're talking now. When it comes to the clearing work and in Thomas's case there, the example of that generation 4, that was all brought through my dowsing, through my intuition.
Okay, cool. And it's just reminded me, one of the videos that I saw on your website was when you were using your pendulum and you created these pendulum charts. And I thought that was a really good idea because it can basically, for those who haven't seen it, there's a chart with sort of like a semicircle, and there are sections for each part of the body or each
example.
And I thought that's a brilliant idea when using the pendulum, instead of just having a yes or a no, yes for one way, no for another, or whatever, then you can almost like cover so many more bases. And it's good for it's really efficient. I found it a really efficient way of getting to the root of a problem, because instead of having to do a yes or no in every single part of the body, you can just sort of narrow it down quicker. And
exactly.
I like that.
The reason why I did that, Jimmy, was I knew I had a client somebody in a session for 45 minutes, and I was like, hey, I want to get as much done as I can for this person, right? So when they having a session, by the time the end of the session, I want them to feel different. Right. And of course, right, like we're working with people, everyone's different. Everyone's a little bit different, right? Again, connecting to that idea that there's a uniqueness to that person. Some people feel everything. Like I've had people that, I've just been yawning so much from all the clearing work, they've fallen asleep. And I've had some people that just go, hey, when do I start feeling anything? So everyone's a bit different, right? And they feel a little bit later on. So I had to find a way of organizing my charts in a way that I get to answers as quick as I can. but also at the same time, not to affect the accuracy as well at the same time, right? We wanted it to be pinpoint what we needed to do. And one thing I have through the years been through a lot of dowsing charts. Obviously, the first time I learned with dowsing, I was using someone else's charts. And obviously, I'm a big fan of taking something and go running with it, right? Making it something a little bit more of me, right? So we all have different ways of being intuitive. We all have different processes, right? It's and I'm a big fan of that for people, because you want to make it your own. So I tinkered with the charts, and I'm very proud in the way that they've become something that which should be an extension of me, right? Because then I always tell my clients that it's really an effortless process. It's a very joyous process, and a lot of people will ask me after a day or so many days of working with clients, you're taking on their energy. God, you must get real tired and exhausted. And I go, well, no, actually, it charges me, because a big reason why I get that the dowsing so quickly is I've found a way of no interference coming in, and essentially I'm a meditative state. So I'm connecting into my energy as well, right, in a very expansive way too. So it's a very beautiful feeling while we're going about doing the session with.
And there's a few things that I wanted to mention. The second one was, I saw a video of you charged up some water, whether that be placing a tensor ring around it in the sun ring or whatever it was, and then and it was tap water, and you had a woman drink it, and then you tried to pull her over, and she came over easily. You didn't hurt her, just so that for those at home, he just sort of made her lose her balance, and then she drank some of this charged water, and you tried to pull her again, and she was like a rock. You couldn't pull her over, because obviously the water, the charged water by the sun ring or the tensor ring, had an effect on her body and sort of made her really stable and grounded. And so that process of charging the water, and because it was an immediate effect. It wasn't something that took an hour to thing. It was like she drank the water, and then you tried it and you couldn't move it. And I found it amazing. I thought it was brilliant. And
I love to use that as a demonstration, because it's very apparent, the change that immediately happens. So what's essentially happening there is we can either do, in that example, you're structuring another medium, right? Another substance in regards to the water. And what I mean by restructuring, you're bringing everything into balance within the water, right? So whether you want to look at it molecularly, or you're restructuring the water so the water becomes more bioavailable to the body when they drink it, right? So this is why I'm a big advocator of things like spring water, right? Where you're talking about water that's more in its natural state, right? Like a human in their natural state is a human being, right? Being is our natural state. That's why people do meditation, right? To get to a meditative state. You feel amazing, or you're in a state of love, that energy that sustains us. Now, so when I use the tensor ring or the sun ring, right, on a glass of water, then again it comes back to this map. We're tapping more into its consciousness too, its expansive consciousness. You can kind of see this as like the whole, right? You're bringing more of that consciousness to the water, its original state, which makes it more balanced. So when someone then drinks that, and that goes into their physiology, which is more importantly their energy field, their auric field, then that imparts that effect on them, which helps to balance their structure too. And because their structure becomes more balanced, then we use that, which is really just a muscle test or a form of muscle kinesiology there, to symbolize and show that person's balance has become better. And that's what that demonstration is all about.
Yeah, it's a brilliant demonstration.
But we can also do that, impart the tensor ring or the sun ring directly to the person too, and we get that same result. It's really interesting. I've even done that at parties, right? Where people are drinking beer, right? And I've got a little tensor ring in my pocket, and I go, "Hey, just pass me your beer," and I don't even tell them, right? And I've got it in my palm, the tensor ring. And I just put it on there for just a few seconds and give it back to them. And I'll go, "Can I just do this test on you?" And obviously, we do that test, and they're just blown away by it, and they're just like, "What's going on?"
Does it stop them falling over?
Yeah, no, quite a beneficial thing, if you've had a few too many. But again, I'm when it comes to the restructuring aspect, which you've touched upon there, I'm never, as a health advocate, I could just go, "Hey, you guys, you should be drinking more water," but hey, I'm not blind to what everybody's likes to drink. I always say, if you're a beer drinker, if you're a wine drinker, if you're whatever that is, tea, coffee, this will work on it, because again, everything we physically perceive comes from energy, comes from consciousness. So those tools have an effect on those.
Now, you see people? Sorry, Jimmy. Can you see people in other, like, versions of people in other realities? So I've done this with one thing I do a long time ago, but I had to call in other versions of myself when I was in a higher realm of consciousness to protect me.
Yes.
Which was quite surprising to see these other versions of myself.
Yeah.
Some were like massive, some were like, they almost look tribal, some are like angelic. So how do you perceive that when you're working with a client?
Yeah, for sure. The way that, as you say, that protective, because this, I'm going to bring that aspect into, right, protection. So, when we're perceiving them that way, we're perceiving them as a being in their own right? But we're all sharing an energy signature. So even though we see them as someone that are in their own right, but they're also part of us, right? Because we share the same energy signature. So it's an interesting dynamic, because from, using the human monkey brain or monkey mind, we kind of, and I do this also when I'm doing session work, I'll go, "Oh yeah, my he's saying this." And it's I'm talking about myself, my higher aspect of myself breaking through for the guidance session, right, as a soul. But the way it's depicted is when they are coming forth to protect you or help you, they are also enabling your auric field, which is a big aspect when it comes to protection, making it more expansive. Okay, so what I see with this protection element, like I'll give you an example of someone, having a panic attack or anxiety, right? Really severe anxiety. And what I see there is an aspect of where they've lost all their protection. And the way I'm showing is that their auric field collapses. And that's why they get that feeling. It's like four walls of a room caving in on them. No wonder they're feeling, "Oh my God, I'm panicky," right? I'm really losing, my centeredness.
Indiana Jones, when the walls are closing in.
There you go. Oh, yeah, there we go. Yeah, there's a visualization of it. Yeah, for sure. So when you're calling upon them, when they're coming forth, they are strengthening your protection through expanding your field. And I always say that, when a big portal as the human is getting our heart open, right? And when we get our heart open more, our auric field expands. And the way I kind of look at the auric field is like our atmosphere, a bit like how we have the aurora phenomena of the Earth, which is to do obviously with what's happening in the atmosphere, right? Of course, it's talking about the poles, North Pole and South Pole, and then also the what's coming from the sun. But it just gives you a visualization that's kind of a bubble or a field that there is to protect you. So when they come up, call upon, we see that auric field expand. And actually in my charts, Thomas, I've got an auric field measure chart. So to answer your question about how you'd see that in regards to my clients, is we actually use that as a diagnostic, where we use a chart where we actually measure their field and see how expansive their field is, or perhaps how diminished or collapsed it is as well. So that gives me an idea of what we need to do for them, and maybe present, as I say, more of their self and bring that through to them.
That's cool. And speaking of auric fields, another one of the videos that I saw was when you had your dowsing rods, and you had a guy in your garden or wherever it was, and you had 3 rings, all of different sizes. One, a big one that you stood in. Or sorry, you, with your dowsing rods, you measured the distance, or the sort of the radius, shall we say, of his auric field, and you went, I think it was about 6 foot or 8 foot or something like that away from himself, and that's where your dowsing rod said his auric field ended. And then you put the rings, the one copper ring, he stood in it, and then you had one above his head, I think, and then one at his heart, and then you did the same test with the dowsing rod, and you were walking back, and you probably could have gone further, but you reached the end of the garden, and it was about, I don't know, 10 meters or whatever it was. And so that the effect of the copper, how does the copper sort of interact with our field, and why does it boost the
Great question.
coverage?
Yeah. No, I remember that video quite well. That was actually my brother who was in the video with me.
Oh, right. Okay.
And
you're a test subject, is he? You using?
He was. He was like, I need to do this video, and he's there. You're my guinea pig. Yeah. So
yeah, cool.
So obviously I'll bring up this tensor ring here. Obviously a smaller version. I the ones I was using were a thicker gauge of wire, which was about an 8 gauge copper wire that we twist. So I'll explain about how the copper is used in regards to a tensor ring and tensor technology, to explain that and answer that question for you, Jimmy. Now, with making a tensor ring, the reason why we use copper, it just seems to be very conductive to being a physical anchor to bring through these etheric energies. Right? So again, coming back to this, right? These etheric energies, right? So copper is used a lot for healing. There's a big community of electroculture gardening at the moment, really taking off big time at the moment using copper.
Yeah.
So what we essentially do with a tensor is we bend copper wire back on itself, and then we put it through a drill, right? And that drill then twists it, right? So it makes this twisted wire. And then the magic of it is when we cut it to a specific measurement, which is known as a cubit, C-U-B-I-T, in tensor circles and community. And so there was a gentleman that brought everything through in the early 90s, which is a guy called Slim Sperling from the US. And he's no longer around anymore. He's passed away, but he brought through the first 2 cubits were called the Royal Sacred Cubit and the Lost Cubit. And he got one of those measurements through a mathematician, which was a friend of his, and he was working with a lot of psychics, right, who was visually seeing what the energies were doing as he was making these products. So he was getting a lot of intel, right? He obviously was intuitive to a certain level, but his gifts weren't visual. So he had certain people that had the gifts of visually seeing what he was making. And then what they were able to do when he would cut it to the specific measurement and then braze it together, so it was a closed loop, is they would see that there was a column of energy going through the ring. Okay, a column of light. So so that kind of birthed this, what they call a tensor ring. Now, so see this as a physical anchor to bring through something etherically through the ring. Okay, so when I got into tensor technology, I was getting intuitively guided measurements, right? It was saying, hey, we need to activate this part of a person to expand them. I'm going to give you a measurement, and I want you to make tensor rings. I didn't know how to do any of this, so I learned that, right? Because I thought, well, either I've got to send all this stuff to someone that maybe is not in tune or alignment with that, or I have to do that myself. And I thought, well, this is part of my path to do this. So I need to do this. I need to learn how to do it. Let's say a few of the first ones weren't too good, right? Like anything, there's a learning curve to everything.
Yeah.
But so when we got to the bigger rings, those 3 rings have all got different measurements to them, which we call 3 different cubits, right? So just to bring it back to this, you could say one had the measurement of bringing the full potential of this reality, and then one brings in all the white component, one brings in the water component. So there's 3 elements, right, which were all anchoring something more different and more expansive. So when we essentially put him standing in a ring, and I use a ring that I remember from the top of him, I just guide it down.
Yeah. That's right.
I'm feeling for any resistance, right? So
yeah. I remember.
Quite often feel a lot of resistance with people was right at that high heart area. A lot of people have blockages and valves over their heart. And you just got to keep it there, and you can feel it then release, and you come back down. So in a way, I'm using the ring not only to get them into that column of light, but I'm also kind of using it as a tool to just get rid of any blockages. A bit like an acupuncture, using a needle to bring flow to the meridian system. So it will come back down there. And what that will then ultimately result in is his auric field more expansive because he's connected more into his expansion. So that's essentially what's happening there.
Oh, okay. And got a question. There's on screen. They're just wearing copper, like a necklace or bra. Because I see you got a copper ring on, haven't you? I think. Does wearing copper like a necklace or a bracelet have a similar effect?
There's no doubt about it that copper has properties to it, right? It's just like I know we're talking about metals here in regards to copper, but all metals have a particular property to it, right? An energy signature of its own, and it's a bit like even we look at copper, we look at the metals, they're part of the periodic table of the elements, right? If we get into chemistry, but with magnesium and oxygen and all these other things, and I always say that all those elements, right, are all part of a full spectrum of energy or frequencies. And why they are all a little bit different from each other, because they hit a part of the spectrum that the other part doesn't. Right? So copper will be bringing forth that aspect of it. But when we're talking about tensor technology, it's not just about the copper. The copper is used in the process, but really for me, it's a secondary aspect to it because we're using it merely as more of a physical anchor to bring an energy through it. So my answer to that is that people do get a lot of benefit with just wearing copper, any form of copper, because as I say, anything on that spectrum of frequency is bringing through some form of energy signature. But when we're making it a little bit more expansive and etheric, then we use copper in a different way, which is the tensor ring, which is, for me, the power of a tensor ring or tensor technology is the measurement. It's the qubit measurement.
Thank you. Cool.
Which we could go into a little bit more, because when we're talking about measurement, we're actually talking about, that brings in mathematics. Right? And so when we look at energy at its core, for me, that's frequency. And I'll actually at that level, it's formless energy. It's frequency, because it can change form accordingly to wherever it goes. Right? That's why with Thomas was mentioning, with versions or variants of himself, they're all a little bit different. because they're going into realities or universes where what we know as science is all different. It's a little bit different from each place.
Mm-hmm.
Right? So they're taking different forms accordingly, right? So maybe different mathematics and so on. So for me, the core element is frequency, a bit like you're going to shape it like clay to whatever reality it goes to. So for here, a form of translation of frequency is mathematics. And that connects into another translation is geometry, numerology. All this aspect is all a kind of language that we have used or incorporated to be a carrier of its original form, which is frequency.
So if you can tune into the right frequency, shall we say, or achieve that state, whether through tensor or what have you, meditation, etc., then you can almost like you could channel yourself in whatever generation you need to, or even from the future or whatever. It reminded me of the fact that Darren Lanka, who aka Bashar is supposedly or says is Daryl in the future. He can just tune into that frequency to bring him through. And it's kind of like that. If you find the right frequency and everything, you can basically do anything. You can kind of change anything as well, can't you? If you can manipulate the frequency, you can shape shift and everything. I mean, not saying that I can do it, far from it, but
that's a great point, Jimmy, because for me, what does energy do? Energy changes form accordingly, right? So if it's a bit like, let's use the analogy of the tectonic plates, right? And underneath you've got this fluidity, right? Under what we perceive physical land masses being on top of it, right? So it's dependent on that fluidity, right? That baseline underneath it. Well, our baseline is energy frequencies, which is always wanting to change its form. But we've got a science that is looking for absolutes. Well, for me, it's like, well, there's no such thing as absolute. An absolute is really based on what you believe it to be so. Right? But that brings in your creative process. That's why I always say that, again, an aspect of our uniqueness is, which should be heralded, we should be embracing our indifferences, is this aspect that we're all going to see it a bit differently, because it's our creative process getting involved into what we then perceive, what we see, which is merely not that thing is absolute and that's how everyone's going to see it. You have a creative process of how you're going to see it, and hence that's how you will see it. So again, there's that aspect of why I feel like sometimes in science they're creating their own blocks or own walls or obstruction through the means that they believe that there is one answer for everything or one absolute for everything.
Question: do you work with zinc as well? Because a reason why I asked that is because I had I got a friend who said she held a copper rod and a zinc rod in each hand. I think it was the copper in the right hand, zinc in the left hand, but I'm not 100% sure about that. It might have been the other way around. But she said the effect was unbelievable. She connected it. She was connected. She aligned, and she just felt so. What's the word? She felt so in tune, and just so balanced, I imagine. But I imagine sort of that they work as sort of the North and the South Pole would work as well, because you're having the opposite dielectric or whatever it's called.
Yes, that's right.
Yeah, and so they would balance you, and they would just they would almost kind of join the two halves of the body, almost like joining the two hemispheres of the brain. But so yeah, do you work with zinc? Have you tried that?
I haven't worked with zinc before, but I'm connecting into it, and I feel it. Yeah, no, I see that. I see what that person was talking about. first of all, that could get into this aspect of duality, which we'll talk about in a minute. You're talking about the poles, or the different hemispheres of the brain, and all these sorts of things. But I do deal with other metals. Like I deal with brass. I work with brass, and I work with silver. So I do make the odd product with silver. So I've got a tensor. See, these are tensor rings that are made of silver, but then flattened.
Oh yeah.
To make them nice and flat, so they sit on your chest a bit easier. With the flattened
yeah, they're cool.
But when it comes to, I'll give you an example over here. This is another product that we make. Is this one here?
Oh, blimey.
Right. So what this incorporates is the tensor ring. Now, going back to Slim Sperling, who originated this, after making hundreds of these rings, he got a bit bored. He was like, "Oh my god, I'm just making the same ring all the time." So he was like, "What else can I do with this? Right? Like, I want to be creative. Look, what else can I do with this?" Being all excited about it. So all of a sudden, he was like, "Okay, what about if I, instead of making it a ring, I make it into a coil?" Right, and you can see that in the middle of that is a coil. Right. So all of a sudden, when he made the coil, he noticed that, and in this coil, the first one he made wasn't twisted wire; it was singular wire, but made in a coil like that, a geometry like that. And he found that there were two poles. So one end drew in that negative energy, or that dark energy, or that unbalanced energy out of a person, and then as it would rotate, right, would again calling upon a vortex, right, that spiral geometry. When it came out the other end, it was transmuted into a light energy, right, a balanced energy. So that's how we used to start using the coil on the body. Somebody would say, "I've got pain in a certain area," and he'd use this coil, rotating it like that, creating that vortex. It would take all that energy out and then flip it into a form that he'd turn the coil around and then put it back into the area, into the body. Now, when we put it, and then he figured out to put it in that way, put it together. And what that really symbolizes, the electromagnetic field of the Earth, right?
Yeah.
The South Pole, North Pole, and that field then it expands out, right? A bit in the way that Thomas, you were mentioning before about protection, when we talked about the auric field, right? As we're creating that bubble, that expansion out. So with this here, as I say, it mimics the Earth and the electromagnetic field of the Earth, right? And when we look at the human, the most powerful electromagnetic field that the part of our body gives off is our heart.
Yeah.
This is why it amazes me in science that the emphasis is on the brain, but the heart's showing so much more potential. And for me, that's why I feel like science is, for me, the heart is what expands everything.
Yeah, I mean,
it's moving forward.
There's, I mean, the heart is more than so much more than just a pump. If it's, there are some there are some people who question whether it's even a pump at all, and and I don't, I kind of can see how it can't be, but yeah, it's definitely electromagnetic, and it definitely gives out, what you've seen, it definitely gives out a frequency, and that kind of reminds me what you were talking about, the electromagnetic field. I watched some videos recently by a guy called David Lapointe, I think. I don't know if you've heard of him, but he did a series of videos called the primer fields. I don't know if I feel like you would really find them interesting, because he talks about electromagnetic and dielectric effects, and he does experiments, and he has these magnetic bowls, and he shows how the electromagnetic fields work on each when they're together, and how there's a sort of a neutral point in the middle, and how you've got different rings, and how metal and non-metallic and magnetic balls, how they react when they're within the field. They form sacred geometry, and they form a ring. It's fascinating, and it's all about plasma and how plasma is created, and how it's the magnetic effect of the bowls affects the plasma, and how the images that you see that are taken supposedly by Hubble and all of the other telescopes, how the images in space could be attributed to this effect of the two bowls, and how they react with each other, and how the electromagnetic fields are created is fascinating. I mean, I can't say that I understand all of it, but he presents it in a way which is visually compatible, and it's kind of, he tries to keep it simple, so he shows you what he's doing. But yeah, he goes on, he talks about magnetic fields, and it kind of explains how the Earth works in a sense, and how the magnetic fields interact, and it sort of creates this sort of almost like infinity symbol and toroidal field, and everything is fascinating. I'll send you the links just in case you want to have a look.
Yeah, that'd be great. Yeah, thank you.
He did I only just found out about him earlier this week, but yeah.
But it's interesting you mentioned it about, how it kind of touches upon what we were talking about, energy. How you said it turns into geometry, right? So it takes form. That's the word geometry, is form, and then that connects into the word that we know as information, right? So the example you were mentioning there, electromagnetic field, right, is that pure energy that then transmutes or translates or expresses itself into a form, into a geometry. Also, as you mentioned about that middle ground, that area where they all kind of connect, which can be seen as, you mentioned about infinity, which is, a bit like that. We make a pendant with the infinity as well. Is that middle bit you could see as that 0 point. We hear that term 0 point, which I like to call neutrality, right? And you look at that, right? We've got two, so a duo, so that's duality, and you've got the two extremes, which are polarities to each other, and then you've got the middle ground, neutrality in the middle, which is a term I use that says balance. And this is why I emphasize so much about the heart, because I feel like the heart is what brings balance to everything. It's kind of our 0 point. Because when we are in that meditative state, right, where we're in a state of of being, our natural state, it brings the heart into it more, and that kind of then allows us to be at that 0 point, because really, when we look into time, really, there's that saying, right, all there is now. So it's that understanding that instead of dragging all our past with us and allowing our past to continually influence us, let's see that every moment is our 0 point, right? What's the best thing we need to do now? And so, when I, at the start of the podcast, I was Thomas, you were asking me about what I do. And I mentioned about this aspect that all the clients that come to me, one thing they have in common is they want change. And something I do in the session is I go, well, if you want change, you have to change.
I was going to
process. So if you're going to keep carrying your past stuff, it means your past will influence the very choice in the now that then will become your future. So that's a way I like to say that moment, that now, of your choices and how you impart or apply your energy in that moment as a 0 point. It's a new beginning. See it as that, because that will allow you to forge something new, to create change.
Because when he placed the ball in sort of in the 0 point between the two magnetic bowls, it was just suspended there. It didn't go one way or the other. But when he tried to push it through just one of the bowls, it met with resistance. But when he got it through, it just like a bullet out of a gun. You could see the projection of energy where the energy was being concentrated. It was fascinating. But yeah.
Yeah. Actually, like coming back to that, I quite often connect that to give an insight to the client. I connect that to obviously the earth, but I also connect that to their heart, right? As we were talking about electromagnetic fields. And how I connect it to this again, right? So the way that we'd see that with the earth, right, with the axis of the earth, so it'd be kind of like that, with the north-south pole. Now, the way that we'd see it with the heart is see that coil is the branch that leads us into our reality. And I always say that to people, that we come here as the soul first and then become the human secondly. Okay, so a means of how we get here is very bound and connected to the heart, right? Because we're taking in our energy signature, our unique energy signature as the soul. So instead of it depicting like that with the heart, we would depict it like that. Right? So it's coming through the heart, but it's rotating, right? So it's creating that vortex, right? Which is also that spiral, right? And that connects on so many levels, right? Not just their spiritual journey or about consciousness work, but also health problems. Like, for example, the number one killer of humans is cardiovascular disease, right? And that's to do with the heart. That's to do with the highways and the roads of the body, which are your arteries and in your veins and capillaries, and what's the emphasis of that is blood moving, flow, right? And vortex is the geometry of flow. So when what takes people out, right, in regards to cardiovascular disease is a heart attack, a myocardial infarction. And why that is? Because the arteries become occluded. They can't enable that flow. And obviously from the medical establishment, they would see, well, the oxygen, that the heart doesn't get enough oxygen to it. The way I kind of see it is why those arteries start to occlude is because things build up on the wall of the artery, is because that person has lost its vortex action that the heart's providing to them. And why that is over a period of time is because we tend to we live too much up here. When we get too analytical, cerebral, and too compartmentalized, which is to zoom in on things. And when we do that, we kind of lose sight of the bigger picture of what's going on. So an aspect of when I work on people with heart disease aspects, and we correct people with arrhythmias where the heart's not in sinus rhythm, is about getting them out of here and getting them back in the heart, because when they get back in here, which means to open it up, bring through more of their expansion, then they create that vortex action that helps them keep everything clean and clear. Right? So that vortex action, and then you see that out in reality, right? You see it in plants, you see it in nature, Fibonacci sequence, you see it in the golden ratio. It's all based on spiral geometry. It's all based on that vortex, and also connected to other things in nature like water, because water is a physical embodiment of flow, right? And again, quite often it's referenced to our blood, right? The blood is our life force, and blood is our waterways of the body. And so when we observe water in nature, we tend to see that the faster water moves, which means water doesn't move like that, it vortexes. And as it moves faster, the water tends to be cleaner, right? And water that lost its vortex action, its flow, and it sits there, it gets dirty and smelly quick, right? So we can use that in regards to how we go about our life too. So when we scientifically look at a vortex, it creates two forces called centripetal and centrifugal forces. One's pulling things to the middle of it, one's pushing things out. And what we've come to find is that process helps keep the water clean. That's a cleansing and detoxifying process. So when I bring that forth to my clients in a way that they are trying to enable their flow, then it's going to promote their body to be in a cleansing state to help them keep clean. Really interesting.
So
when you're working with people, do you find like, because I mean, I see, we're always going to see things differently, everyone is.
Yes.
But sometimes I'll see past life wounds. I'll see other aspects of like other realities. Like, do you see these things when you're working on people?
Yeah, for sure. And you're so right there, Thomas, in regards to we all do things a little bit different. Like some people are, their intuitions, all of it is visual. Yeah, and I'll say it right now. I don't see auras like how some people can visually see it.
Yeah.
My intuitive aspect is I feel it, right? I can feel that, right? So, but in regards to those things coming up in my method with working with clients, yes, they do come up. The past life aspects come up a lot because, a lot of people, bring forth big questions. I'm sure you get it too, right? That they're just looking for answers. They just want to know, and that's why I'm massively about empowering people, because a lot of people are experiencing things, observing things on a day-to-day basis, but they really don't know what it's all about. What does it mean? What does it represent, right? So, and I've noticed that when they learn more of that, that's a healing mechanism in itself, right? So with the past life stuff, a lot of people will ask me and go, hey, they'll come to me and they'll want to work on trauma or PTSD, right? Something that happened earlier in their life, right? When they were young. And they go, hey, why was I born into a family that had all this trauma in it, right? I had an abusive alcoholic father, or it could be another example. And what we find is it's a follow-on effect of where they were in their past life, right? And the way I look at these lifetimes, right, is this aspect that we come here to learn lessons, right? And experience, why we have experience, why we create experience, because at the core of every experience is there is a lesson to be learned. And sometimes when we're up here, when we kind of compartmentalize it into good and bad, right, which is a duality approach, we start to say, oh, that's a bad experience and that's a good experience. And we kind of miss the lesson that's in that experience, which, touches on the word karma, right? Where it will be, that experience will come back, right? So you then have another opportunity to learn from it, right? To resolve the karma. So this aspect of why we come here is to have that experience, get to the heart of the matter, right? A common expression, right, is to get to the core of something, is the heart, till we get that experience. So therefore we don't have to have that again, right? We break the loop. So if we don't break the loop in our past lifetime, sometimes we're thrown into a family or a situation for our next lifetime that is still a continuation from that last lifetime, because there's things that are not finished with, right? These experiences you need to have to learn the lesson, to grow, to evolve. So definitely aspects of past life stuff come up quite a lot in session work.
Thomas, I was just wondering, I know you're a sort of a fan or an expert on Ed Casey.
I'm just gonna bring him up. Go ahead, man.
But has he ever mentioned, because I haven't really read any of Edgar Casey's channelings, but are you familiar with Edgar Casey, Chris, by the way?
I have seen a few of his quotes and I'm aware of them, but just like you, Jimmy, I haven't read any books.
No.
Okay.
Thomas has read quite a bit from what I gather. Has Ed Casey ever mentioned anything about like the stuff that we're talking about copper, about magnetism and dielectric fields and stuff like that?
I'm sure he has. So for people that don't know Casey, he died in the 1940s, but they're still writing books about him. I just downloaded 2 new books on Audible. They have like a 31-hour Audible documentary about the guy. He would go into a trance. He could diagnose any medical illness and tell you how to cure it. He only got upset when people started asking him spiritual questions because he was a Sunday school teacher and he was talking about chakras and all these other things. And he was like, I don't want to talk about this. This is like the 1890s. But he was curing all these people, and he did get into a lot of stuff. I mean, I have so many books on Audible that are because the Edgar Cayce Institute's in Virginia Beach, Virginia. They're still writing books about this guy. He's kind of one of the reasons why the New Age movement. But I just downloaded 2 new books, one on soul groups and soul karma or something. And then another one was a new one he has on the Akashic records. But that's where he would get primarily his information. He would say he would go in total trance. He couldn't remember anything he said, and then he would just write it down. So and he would be like, he'd go into the Akashic, he would explain the whole process. He would find exactly, like, let's say someone had a medical illness, and he's like, okay, well, the entity, he'd call the person the entity. He'd be like, the entity is in this house at this place while he's in trance. And he goes, okay, he needs to go to this drugstore and buy this and apply it this way. And then he needs to go over here to this place and buy this. And then he needs to incorporate these plants. And they would follow up 50 years later with some of these people. But yeah, he would talk about these things. There's so much he talked about. They're still using. But yeah, he was making devices. He was channeling devices while he was in trance, and they would make them. People are still using them.
Oh, amazing. Yeah. Yeah.
It's a bit, they say Tesla sort of just imagined his inventions and then made them and then built them. It wasn't as if he sort of, and I imagine you do that with some of the copper stuff. You just sort of see what you can come up with. It's like writing a song, say, for example.
We're talking generally about it's channeling, right? All different ways of channeling, right? So, and that's what makes us, we're all talking essentially about the same thing, but just different ways of doing it that's unique to the person, right? So we will all find our way. So yeah, all the stuff that, all the qubit measurements, right? The measurements that then go into the tools have all been intuitively provided to me. Mainly, again, with these people, they're passionate about something, right? And it's like when people say, hey, the universe sees that you're passionate, you're excited about something. They know that you're a conduit, a medium for that, right? To implement that. And then when you create that right state, which we could perhaps say is a state of being in that kind of trance state, then that enables that information or wisdom to be channeled through you. So therefore you can then physically embody that, right? You be, in a way, like a tensor ring, you become that physical anchor to bring it into physical existence or reality. They're all like that. Even Rudolf Steiner and all these people that have got so much wisdom, that so in a way so ahead of their time. A bit like what you're talking about before, Jimmy, about seeing in the future or
channeling the future.
You had a tap on the pulse, so to speak, of what was happening and what was going to go down. So yeah, now a lot of people like that. And that's just something I've always loved. Whether it was what we mentioned earlier about the dowsing charts. Got into dowsing charts, and I was like, no, I want to make it my own. I love to grab something and evolve it, shift it. Because hey, if I'm going to be talking to people about ascension and talking about growth and evolvement, well, I'm not just going to tell people about it. I want to walk the talk. I want to show that in everything that truly holistic represents. So we create healing systems for people to learn, who get dowsing charts themselves. They get an instruction manual if they're somebody brand new and they don't know how to use a dowsing rod or a pendulum or muscle testing. And we make products. Every aspect of True Holistic is based on that aspect, that that understanding of nothing's an absolute. Everything needs to evolve itself. For me, that's the aspect that we're always got to keep moving, which is again connecting into the aspect of that vortex, that flow.
Yeah. And speaking of sort of making things your own, and I'm not going to ask you to name them or disclose anything, although you can if you want. But you put on one of your pages of your website, you've put some the qubit measurements of some things, but then you've got some stuff that you're not allowed to reveal or is hidden or whatever. But what is the sort of just because I'm curious, you don't want to reveal them just because of their sort of I was just wondering what
essentially what I do is I'll give you an example of this. I don't really make choices as the human. I allow my soul to make those choices, right? So obviously when I'm in the charts, I come up with ideas that probably out of thought more than out of feel. And then I'll put them into my chart and I'll go, hey, because some of them I think, oh, what a great idea. I bring it to my chart, my soul's like, nah, don't do that. or it's not right time to do it. Okay, so when it comes to those qubit measurements, there's been many times where I'm like, I want to disclose, I want to get this out to people, but my soul's kind of going, no, not yet.
Yeah, not the right time. Yeah, sure. I get that.
So it's very bound and connected to this. So one thing I do recommend people when they buy the products is I quite often say, let's touch base after you do that, because I want you to learn how to use them to their highest capacity, and also learn more about them, because a lot of those energetics are bound to a new way of understanding that, because again, this was intuitively guided to me. This didn't come from a book or anything like that. And it was something that was being brought through, and I was like, how do I need to put it down into a form to then show it to people, right? Because me talking about it, it's just like a lot of times to my clients, it was just going over their head. So, it's sometimes, and I know you guys feel that there's something that you innately know, but at the same time, how do I put it in a form that people understand it, right? Because we feel so empowered and so excited about it, but that's us being excited about it. When we bring it forth to someone, some people just won't dial into it or connect into it and understand it, right? So, and hence, therefore, it can't help them, right? Because that person's got to have a sense of allowing, which comes from understanding what it kind of represents. So when it comes to those qubit measurements, a lot of those ones that I don't put on the thing are more expansive, and they are more in relevance to this map. So some of the people that have worked with me for a while or show a really strong connection to tensor products or tensor technology, and eventually my soul goes, yep, we can empower them with that measurement because they're ready.
So it's almost like sort of the pieces of the puzzle. You can't just give everyone everything to start off with, because they won't necessarily know what to do with it. So it's like piece by piece, you release them as and when. And I understand that.
It's like I'm not going to give them the energetic that just goes straight to here. They have to master being here first.
Yeah, totally.
Right, so we give them energetics more bound to bringing the highest potential here, and when they're ready, then the highest potential of this next element, and so on.
It's like getting them acclimatized to the energies. Correct. When a baby's born, getting them acclimatized to food, start off with certain things, and then you build up. A
bit like what Thomas was saying earlier about seeing it as a computer, this big computer. It's a bit like you're connecting into the iCloud, you're downloading all this new coding or information, kind of like DNA, right? Into the computer, and then you've got to process that,
Mm.
right? And then once you've gone through all that processing, and now that energetic that's coming through the qubit measurement is now part of you, what you're bringing forth now, you're ready for that next step.
Yeah, totally. I get it. Thank you, Frank. Right, Michelle. Hey, Michelle. She says, I put a question on the screen. On the screen. What can she do to clean her circular tensor ring?
Yes, great question. Because the thing with copper, it patinas over a while, so it darkens. So, some people like that darker color. Doesn't mean the energy of it changes. It's just how it appears, right? So, what you do is, what I do is you get lemon juice. You can also use vinegar. And what you do is you just let it sit in some lemon juice. Doesn't take long. It'll just take 2, 3, 4, 5 minutes. And it'll already come up looking like when you bought it. And what you can do for an extra step, you can get like one of the steel wool type of things that you do when you're cleaning dishes.
Oh yeah.
You can get one of those, and you can just get the copper, and you just give it a shine. So the lemon juice brings the color back, but if you want it to be really, really like completely brand new and it's real shiny, then use that steel wool just to buffer it after you've cleaned it with the lemon juice.
Okay. Cool. And would that be the same for, say, a copper vessel, a copper cup, or a copper bottle? You would just, if you wanted to clean it, because I have a copper flask or copper bottle, and I don't think I looked after it properly, because there were some times where I drank it and I could taste the copper, and then I felt nauseous and I wanted to be sick. So I knew that I wasn't looking after it properly.
That can be the problem there too, a bit, Jimmy, with when you're dealing with water. Like I also get questions about, because we make these tensor rings also for, as you mentioned about that test, when someone drank water, is we use it to restructure water, right, or have that energetic effect on water. And a lot of people will go, well, can I collect water in big containers? Can I just throw that copper ring in the container with the water? And a lot of the times I'll say it's best to keep it out of the container.
Yeah, because it doesn't need to be in the water.
Underneath it, right outside of the container. So because I'm aware that sometimes when copper is in direct connect with water, over time that copper can seep into the water, and you can drink that, and that can create an imbalance with the amount of copper then you have physical copper in the body, and that can become a problem over a period of time. So I understand what you mean, that when you decide not to do that anymore, or drink that with tasting the copper in it.
I think that I noticed it. I think that messed up my gut microbiome or whatever it is. For a while, I had to rebalance it and sort that out after I did that. But like you say, you don't necessarily need to put the copper in the water or have water on the copper. You can or in direct contact. You can just place it on the ring. That's more than sufficient, isn't it? That's more than adequate. So you don't need to sort of run the risk of copper ingestion or poisoning or whatever it is. But
it's to understand those energetic properties. Like I still get I people are like, oh, does it go through the wall? In a room, like we're talking about energy. Energy goes through everything, right?
Yeah. This is Kathy from Ancient Tools. She says, I have an intricate copper pendant that combines 2 different qubits. The energy it transmits is rather impressive, particularly in meditation, with it sitting over a main energy center. I hadn't expected it to be so strong. Is because we've mentioned about sort of doing just 1 qubit, whatever the value of that is, but combining qubits, that multiplies the effect, does it?
It does, and it's also understanding that when we use the different qubits, different rings, you're actually bringing through different energy. Okay, so for example, we create a trio set of 3 rings, which is on the website. It's called Neutrality Trio, right? And as I mentioned about neutrality earlier, it was meaning balance. We bring things into a balanced, structured state. Going back to this, one of the rings brings through the energetics of the highest potential here, and one brings in the air element, and then one brings in the water element. So, and obviously they're going to help each other, right? They're going to amplify each other when you put them three together. But when it comes down to it, all three of them have, you could say, three separate purposes as well.
It's kind of a bit like I'm just sort of referencing it or applying it to what I do when I do my frequency stuff. It's a bit like combining frequencies. You have the different, say, if I'm doing a far some healing frequencies and combine 3 or 4 different frequencies. You've got the individual frequencies, which obviously the body can read, just like it can read the individual frequencies of the tensor rings. But then you also have almost like the binaural effect or trinaural effect or quadnaural effect of them all together and making sort of one frequency, but then you've got them separate as well. So that kind of is the same thing. Like we were talking about, but the channeling is the same thing, but just in a different form again.
That's right. Well, there's so many ways of, a lot of people use Rife machines and all that sorts of things in regards to doing frequency work. So there are different forms of doing that. Also with that question, let's say if you had 3 rings and they were all the same qubit, right? So they're facilitating the same energy. There has been research done on that by another person in the tensor technology field, where they found that it kind of did did amplify its effect. When you stack them 3 of the same energetic, it did help to just put the icing on the cake and just amplify it as well.
Have you ever, speaking of that, have you ever sort of worn or used so many different tools that it's almost you felt overwhelmed and you've kind of been somewhere that you weren't expecting, sort of thing?
Yeah, I've got a great one for you here, Jimmy. I would say to people, hey, when I get intuitively guided the energetic, who's the guinea pig? So all of a sudden I wear it and I feel it and I'm like, oh my God, there's been so many things, like we've even got an energetic or a qubit that's specifically focused for the third eye. Opening, activated it. And I can remember wearing that for the first time and just feeling like the clarity was like, oh my God, never felt this clarity before. It was just like, just open up. But I'll give you an example of something that didn't go so nicely, let's just say, right? I made this product called the I Am Everything Pyramid. It's, again, on the product store. And it's a pyramid that we incorporate the qubit measurements, which the legs of the pyramid are actually made of brass. And then we also encapsulate crystal powder into resin as the kind of a cap of the pyramid. So we incorporate crystal as well as the tensor technology all together. And it brings, why I call it the I Am Everything Pyramid, because it brings through all the elements of you, right? And it's a great distance tool, because you can put little intention notes underneath it with a photo or a name of a person. It will direct that energy, which is not necessarily sending that energy to that person. It's about connecting that person with more of their energy, right? So when I was making that for the first time, the new energetic that was bound to that was the fire element, right, which is down here. So a very expansive element, but fire. The symbolism that I understand of fire is burning bridges, right? Like the phoenix and the flames. Like we dissolve and burn, the attachments, all the things that need to go. But anyway, when I was first using that, I thought, okay, I don't know how long I'm going to put my name or my photo underneath. I'm just going to do it and let's see how we go. So I had that up quite up high, and I had this pyramid, and I had my photo underneath it. And then one evening, I was just burning up. I was like, what's going on? I'm like, it was like I was having a fever. And this, funnily enough, this energetic taught me more about what the fever does, what it is. And I come from a medical background. I should know what fever is about, but I learned more about it through this. So again, every experience has something you can learn from it. Now, so anyway, I was burning up and I was like, but I haven't got any other symptoms of coming down with anything. I'm not sneezing, I'm not coughing, but I'm just burning up big time. And then all of a sudden my son was getting the same symptoms. I was like, what's going on, man? We didn't get any symptoms leading up to a burning. Then when I go into my treatment room, I look at and I go, oh, my photo's under the pyramid. And then it was on a stack of shelves. And then under the shelf, which was another layer down, under the pyramid, my son's photo was there. I was like, so I took my name, I took his photo out of that. And then within a couple of hours, it was gone. I was like, oh my God.
Bloody hell.
But what it taught me was this aspect of the fever. We obviously know fever, right? Increase in temperature in the body. And we know it's trying to purge things that shouldn't be in the body, right? So it's starting to connect into what I was knowing about this fire element. And I was realizing that actually a fever is actually a time when the body's trying to reset itself, right? So this aspect of, it didn't necessarily require a pathogen. You know how they say medical thing, oh, there's a pathogen or pathogenic microbe, and that's why you're going to get fever and you're going to get sick. It's more sort of my understanding that actually a fever's coming through to actually assist you to somewhere you need to be or need to go. It's like a replenishment. It's a massive cleanse, if you want to see it that way. It's a resetting of the body. So through that experience, even though it didn't feel good at the time, I learned so much about it. And then what I was at least now able to tell my clients when they start buying products of that energetic, that just take it slowly. Be careful, because I was starting to get clients and I was going to work and I was feeling like I was really hot and burning up, and I was other people were experiencing it too. So that was a really interesting example of that.
Well, Thomas knows all about having a fever. He had one of about, I don't know, 100.
Yeah, 104.7 about a week ago.
Oh, yeah.
But I love fire energy, man. I tell you, that's one of my favorite energies to work with is fire. So
transformational. Big time.
You didn't have Thomas's picture under your pyramid last week, did
you? There's something going around the United States right now.
Right. Yeah.
A lot of spiritual people getting sick.
Yeah.
I know what you mean.
So that energetic, I was like, so then you implement it with people that need rapid healing. But at the same time, you give them a disclaimer. You go, okay, you've got cancer. Somebody will come to me and they've got, stage 3, stage 4 cancer, right? And like a lot of times when they come and see us, right, we're like the last call. I've been to this person, the doctor says I can't do anything, and it's like then they expect a miracle. But quite often I'll say to them, hey, you believe that you need, because a lot of times with cancer, the doctors say, oh, you haven't got much time, but actually it's more that person's energy going into that belief that makes it. So a lot of people I've worked with that have got severe cancer, but they haven't gone through the whole medical thing. Actually, they do have time. It's just a belief aspect of it. Now, so I quite often say to them, hey, if you want something changed quickly, I'll give you an energetic, but here's a disclaimer. You won't feel very good going through it. It's a bit like it's a bit like when somebody decides to do a liver gallbladder flush, right? It's like, and I like to connect that with overall healing, right? Because I'll do a healing session on someone and they'll say, well, since you did that session, I'm going through a hell of a lot. I'm not actually feeling very good. And you have to explain to them that we've opened the door, enabling flow back to the body. And you've had areas where you've accumulated stuff, right? Toxicity that needs to be shifted out. And the difference between that and, let's say, someone going to do a cleanse is just knowing why they're experiencing that, right? Because if somebody does a liver and gallbladder flush, that they know that through a friend, or let's say they've done it before, that when I get to the point where I'm taking Epsom salts and olive oil and that stuff, for a weekend, I'm going to be in the bathroom quite a bit, right? Or I'm not going to be feeling so good. But at the same time, it's taking me somewhere that I need to go. It's cleansing my liver. But a lot of people are going through that same process as a healing, but they believe it's when they're sick. But it's actually the body's actually in a healing phase. But the difference is they don't know why they're experiencing that, right? Where in the case, they know why, right? So that's a really interesting thing, because that healing process can be quite harsh in certain ways. And actually, another system that I made, which was called a broadcasting system, which implements a tool that you were mentioning before, Jimmy, which is the sun ray. I don't have it here with me to show the people, but it's, it looks like the sun. It's just that kind of, I guess, a symbology of it. Oh, sorry. So the rays of the sun. And so it's a broadcasting tool we use. And within this, right, okay. Now, the broadcasting system.
Persistent.
How do I pull? I need to pull this phone out of the plug. Okay, perfect. Thank you. Right, okay, so the sun ring is a broadcasting device, and in this system, you take all your knowledge of the physical world, right? Herbs or supplements and vitamins, all those sort of things, superfoods. But what you do is you douse to find out what you need. Let's say, and I'd use this it's called the broadcasting system for a Facebook Live one time, where I had a lady in Australia, and she was saying, I know I've got something going on in my liver, right? It feels really dense, heavy. So I doused to find out what we needed and went to aloe vera, of all things. So what you do is then you know that you need aloe vera, but you don't take the physical substance, you impart the energy signature of aloe vera, right? So you do it energetically. So you get the sun ring, and I placed it underneath like the camera or the microphone I was using. And I wrote aloe vera on an intention note, and I said to the client over in Australia, I said, I'm going to use intent now to direct that energy of aloe vera to you. I want you to close your eyes and focus on your liver, right? Using your attention. So we did that, and within seconds, she was like, "Oh my God, my energy is just rocketed. Like, I'm just like clarity." And I go, "Yes, that's the liver opening up, right? Letting go of the toxicity, letting go of what it needs to get." But I said to her, "Just start to tell me when that energy just starts to taper off." So about a minute later, she goes, "Yeah, it's starting to taper off now." And I go, "Okay, we'll stop it there." And she goes, "Well, why are you stopping it?" And I go, "Well, that's your own body telling you that if we keep going, you're going to be spending the day in the bathroom or lying down for the rest of the day. You're going to go into a healing crisis where the liver's shifting too much stuff all at one go." So one really good thing about that system, and what I learned about it, is you can still do the liver flush, the gallbladder flush, but more in a gentle manner. And at the same time, you learn how the body gives you cues and communicates to you about what you should do, and also for how long. So it was a cool demonstration of a cleansing effect, but doing it in a way that I guess is more intuitive.
Yeah, brilliant. Just go show you don't necessarily need the physical substance to be able to use its effect.
Yeah, because when we're talking about frequencies, you're talking about its basis of what it is. And then as we talked about before, formless energy transforming itself into a form.
Yeah, totally.
Let's wrap it up, brother. We had an hour and a half.
Yeah. Okay, cool. Well, Chris, it's been fascinating. Thank you so much. Really enjoyed learning about everything and finding a bit more about the stuff that you do. It's really, really cool. Kathy of Ancient Tools says she's in New Zealand as well and will happily be a guinea pig for your products anytime.
Great. You're most welcome.
So yeah, thank you again. And
thank you for inviting me and allowing me to be a guest on the podcast today.
No, pleasure. I really enjoyed it.
Find Chris at trulyholistic.net. So it's up there on the screen.
Yeah, he's got some fabulous videos on there where he goes through everything, explains what he does, and all of the different aspects of his holistic, truly holistic approach. Yeah, it's been great. So thank you, Chris, and thank you everyone for listening, and we'll see everyone next week. Thank you, brother.
See you guys later.
Bye.
Au revoir.